This podcast is sponsored by Xgrowth. Xgrowth is the APAC ABM agency. If you and your organization are looking to land and expand enterprise and mid-market deals, Xgrowth is the agency to help. Xgrowth works with a wide range of international and global technology vendors, service providers, and B2B SaaS companies. If this sounds like something you're interested to know more about, make sure to check out Xgrowth at xgrowth.com.au. That's xgrowth.com.au and chat with the APAC ABM agency.
What's up, marketers, and welcome to another episode of the Growth Colony podcast. I'm Liza from Xgrowth to tell you that each episode we bring in B2B leaders to chat about how you can achieve those everyday wins in the marketing world. Whether you're new to the B2B game, working at a leadership level, or even just showing some interest, we know you'll love the episode. So grab a drink, get comfy, and enjoy the show.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode. I'm Shane Hoda with Xgrowth, and today I'm talking to Mark McInnes, outbound sales trainer and founder of Sales Development Australia. Mark has a wealth of experience when it comes to building sales development teams and managing them efficiently, and has helped many organizations across Australia and New Zealand do exactly that. I'm excited for us to sit down and chat about how to build a sales development sequence. We will talk about calls, we'll talk about emails, LinkedIn, direct mail, and how to leverage them in your sequence so you can grab the attention of your prospects. On that note, let's dive in. Mark, thanks for joining us.
Shaheen, thank you very much for having me back on the Growth Colony podcast. I really appreciate it. It's great to be here. Thank you.
It is great to have you back. I had tons of fun last time when you were on, and I think this is also a very topical. It's an area that I think a lot of organizations are expanding in, building that sales development team within the organization. So I think it's very relevant. You're in a very hot area. So super excited for this chat.
Thank you very much. Look, it is. It's an exciting space as long as you like it. If you don't like it, it can be a painful space. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot of. There's a lot of people that are trying things that aren't being very successful. There's a whole bunch of really poor advice out there as well. So I'm really pleased to come on to your show and share what I see that's working, what my team's doing, and what my clients are doing. So yeah, cool.
So let's talk about that, because I think a lot of the content and examples when it comes to building these sequences, managing SDRs, working with SDRs, a lot of it comes from the big kind of sales engagement platform or CRM platforms. What are your thoughts on these platforms being the source of truth or kind of source of reference for people who are, again, building these sequences, managing SDRs? What are your thoughts on these resources?
Okay, so we're talking about So the platforms themselves, let's put them aside. Let's talk about what they're suggesting people should do, right? So what are the sequences? So we all have seen some of the great platforms that are out there, HubSpot, Outreach, SalesLoft. There's a whole bunch of them, and I just use them as examples. I'm not calling them out specifically, but they release tools like, hey, this is the cadence that's the number one performing B2B cadence, for example, right? What do I think of those? Well, let me try and make it very clear. I think they're fake news. I think in a lot of cases they're deceptive, they're misleading, they're ineffective, they're probably fraudulent, they're poorly written and poorly presented. Is that clear?
I think you drove the message home pretty clearly. I think it's a little confused. So you're saying they're not good? Is that what I'm hearing? Okay,
so let's just take a step back. So what do these companies, what are they trying to achieve when they release these pieces of documentation? Right, so you're a marketer, your listeners are marketers, right? So if we've created a piece of content, what is it that these platforms are trying to do? They're trying to sell their platforms, right? So they're trying to get people to click on the download, put their email address in, and then be contacted. What are the chances that the content that you're getting is actually the best B2B cadence? I'd say it's very low. If you were to look at who's written that cadence in that article, in a lot of cases, it's come from the marketing department of that particular engagement platform. And the goal for that platform is simply to try and get as many downloads as possible. Right, so that's their goal, and so you have to think about how can this B2B cadence be the most effective, right, or whatever it is, the number one B2B cadence or the most effective cadence or whatever they're using to get you to click on it. So if you have a think about that, like the buying personas and the geographical areas and the communication challenges that we've got across different platforms, across different industries, across different geographical locations is so varied, there cannot possibly be one that is the best. And this whole, you do 18 touches across 27 days is just rubbish. Like when you put that into practice, it doesn't work. And so that means that we're spamming people unnecessarily under the pretense of selling a piece of software. So that's why I've used those words up front. Right? It's because getting people to download and then implement that cadence, you're just setting up a whole bunch of marketers to spend a lot of time writing outreach that's going to be ineffective. And then the poor old SDRs and salespeople that are supposed to execute the 18 touches across 27 days, I mean, you're setting them up for failure. Sure. Maybe you'll get their email. If you're the software provider, you'll get their marketing manager or sales leader's email, and you can pitch them, and that's what they want. But the downstream effect of that is that there's a whole bunch of people doing ineffective outreach. And if you go one step further, there's a couple of thousand prospects that are in that damn cadence. How do you think they feel? Did anyone think about that when they thought about that as a lead magnet? So I don't think that's a great way to go to market.
Okay, got it. Why do you think? I mean, by the way, this is a very interesting topic because this also happens in our space, in the ABM space, where you're right. It's the marketers of the ABM companies writing the content, and they're not necessarily practitioners, and their job is not to run effective ABM campaigns or effective sales development entities, but their objective is to get those MQLs, hit those MQL numbers, and baby, we're good to go. Why do you think marketers and sales leaders persist with these sequences? Like, why do you think we constantly keep going back to them, even though they might not be very efficient, they might not work very well? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think people do that because the alternative is hard, and for two reasons. The alternative is really hard, and the lack of information about what they should really be doing. And what I mean by that is, the alternative.
What's the alternative? What do you mean? Yeah, what do you mean by alternative?
So the alternative is to really break. So why do sales and engagement platforms? Why are they successful? Because they're promising increased activity, right? So what's the problem that they have? Not enough leads, not enough meetings, right? And what's the solution to that? Okay, you've got two. You could get if Mark is my SDR, right, and Mark's not creating enough leads, I've got two options. I could automate as much of his activity as possible to get that activity up, right, or I could coach him and train him individually and focus on a quantity play. By putting in a sales engagement tool or a CRM or using automation, and that's what all these tools are, okay, then I can dictate 100, for example, pieces of outreach for Mark to do every day, and basically just create a level of overwhelm, but have him operating at a high rhythm that's programmed by the sales ops, sales engagement, sales enabler, sales leader, and probably the marketing function as well. But the downside of that, of course, is what? The quality. So the other side of that means that, okay, if that's not going to be your approach, then you have to increase the level of quality of outreach. And you can't lift that across the company in a single piece of tech, where you can lift the quantity in a single piece of tech. So that's what I mean by, the lazy or the easy approach. Right? It's much easier for me to go and get a piece of tech for $1,000 a month or however much and implement that across the entire sales team and lift everyone's quality, lift everyone's quantity. And if we're getting a 2% response rate from 100 emails, then we're going to hope that we're going to get a 2% response rate from 1,000 emails. Right? That's the easiest way for sales leaders and marketers to increase their lead flow. And that's what we've been focused on. I believe we are at the end of that right now.
So tell me how do you approach it?
Well, quality. You have to play the quality play, right? So instead of going for, 100 phone calls or 50 emails or whatever else, you approach each sales SDR individually, give them the tools, the training and the resources to focus on making 27 phone calls and measuring things like conversations instead of responses. So if you can get somebody to have 6-10 conversations a day off 27 dials, for example, rather than 6 conversations off 100 dials, which one sounds like it's more attractive? The first one, right? But there's a lot of work to do in order for you to get there. Or you can just automate it and try and get your 6 conversations off 100 dials or 100 emails or whatever that input is, right? 100 LinkedIn messages or whatever the case may be. The channel is almost irrelevant at this point.
Are you suggesting that they're, like these sales engagement platforms, do you use them when you are kind of talking to people, or you think there is still a room for them? What are your thoughts on the platforms themselves?
So no, I don't. We don't use them because at all. So the ability to automate something that will land flat, that is, what am I trying to say? It's too appetizing, like it's too easy to automate something, and as soon as you start automating something, it breaks down. Instead, we spend all of our time on the front end building out list quality and then manually do the activity. So, how many meetings can somebody book a day? Right, so if you're looking about SDR, right? So we find that we can get our team booking up to 8 meetings a day, right, using manual outreach, depending on the campaign.
Jeez, 8 meetings a day.
8 meetings a day, okay, that's an unusual day. My team would probably, one person in our team would have one of those days a week. On the whole, people are booking multiple meetings multiple times a day based on what campaign they're working on, who the ICP is, and all that sort of stuff. But you simply don't need to do automation if you set it up right in the first place. And my guess is you're going to say, well, how do you do that, or what should we be doing, right?
Yeah. So because I like for us to maybe define quality, right? Like, is this writing bespoke emails for every persona? Is it 100% personalization? Is it what do you like? What is your definition of quality?
Okay, so we're doing templated emails that people send manually, right? So they go into our CRM and there's a templated emails and they just click them and send them, right? And they might change the PS, or they might change a little bit of the context in the first preview line, but it's pretty much generic. Okay, so they're not spending hours doing personalization, but where the work comes from, and this is one of the reasons why we're leaning on the sales engagement platform so much, is because we do all the work as sales leaders up front before we give our SDRs the information. What happens in most organizations? People download, the cadence platform that we talked about, right? So they download that and then they go into a funnel, right? So then whoever that software tech, so big tech, then turns around to the SDR team and go, hey, SDRs, here's 5,000 people that downloaded that awesome cadence, B2B cadence. Here's their email address, their phone numbers, and their titles. These are warm leads. Go and hit them. We actually go many steps further than that. So first thing we would do is we would divide them into ICPs, very, very narrow. Okay, and then we'd figure out what's the best way for each one of those ICPs. How are they going to communicate? What channels are they likely to respond to? So, sales leaders, for example, are more likely to pick up their phone. CEOs of smaller business, or people in smaller businesses, less than 50 mil here in Australia, are going to be much more likely to pick up either their mobile phone or you'll be able to get through them via their front office number. Whereas larger organisations are going to be significantly harder, and you're going to need to warm them up a little bit beforehand. Before that, we'd then take that data and we'd pre-call all those numbers to figure out who was going to pick up their mobile number, or who was going to pick up their direct line and who wasn't. And we do that before we give it to the SDR team. So instead of having the SDR team making calls to 100 numbers and they don't know who's going to pick up or the chances of them picking up or not, instead we give them 30 names and say, Mark, here's 30 names. We know that everybody on this list has picked up when we've called them between 1 and 4 times. So if you call them between 1 and 4 times, you've got to have a conversation with them. So that completely flips the mindset of the SDR, right? So they're not dialing with Facebook open because they know that they've got like a 30% chance of the pickup. So they're dialing with their script open, right? So we do 45-minute call blocks, and they're all standing up behind their desk, ready to go with a smile on their face, and they've all had a quick conversation beforehand in our Google Meets about what the most likely objections are going to be, what are the talking points for this ICP, what's our 4 most popular next steps, send me something, call me back, and we role play that. We have a quick chat, bang, go make 45 minutes worth of calls. We have a chat going. Everyone's going, just spoke to Mark, just spoke to Trevor, just spoke to Mary, great conversation, and we're where everyone's giving a high five on, an emoji high five every time somebody gets a conversation. And then at the end of that 45 minutes, we go, how many calls you make, how many conversations do you have, what do we learn? Great. Go back, do your next steps. And then we'll come back an hour later and do another 45-minute calling block, for example. And as a result, we get really good results. But that's because we've done the work beforehand and we haven't just stripped off a heap of data and then sent it to the SDRs to clean up. So that's what I mean by, you've got to do the work before the work. There's a great guy, and anyone that's listening should really be following him or buy his books, Phil M. Jones. He's a really clever speaker out of the UK. I'm a big fan. He's written a couple of books, exactly what to say, exactly how to sell, that sort of thing. They're the names of his books. But he says, you've got to do the work before the work, before the work, right? And he's saying you've got to do the planning and the preparation, then the rehearsal, then start selling. And I just love that. And I think too many people are missing the work before the work and they're just trying to do the work. And so we rely on the automation to try and make up for that lack of effort. And of course, what happens is you get an email that's not relevant. So you press delete or spam.
Just listening to this, there's a lot of pre-work that you go through. And I feel like a lot of people will be listening to this and they're like, what? You call the numbers to figure out who picks up, and you go through all that effort before the sales team starts dialing. Mind blown. Just crazy amount of work.
Well, what's your most valuable resource, right? Well, you started this by saying SDR, sales development, is hot topic. So if your most valuable resource is that it's the most valuable resource is the people to do the work, the good trained people, then treat them with that. And this is the big problem with the SD function right now. So whether it's business development or sales development or inside sales, is they're underappreciated. So I like to tell sales leaders, if you want to build a good SDR team, let's say you've got 100 SDRs, first thing you should do is sack about 33% of them. Okay, get rid of 33%, but keep the budget. And when what you do is, so you might even want to sack, up to 50%, but between 33 and 50%, get rid of those SDRs, then keep the budget and reinvest that budget back into the existing people, the people that you've kept in relation to training, tools, and resources. And that will enable you to provide them with the content that I've just talked, the types of things that I've just talked about. And I guarantee you that the 2/3 of the people left will be booking more meetings than what you had with the 100% of the people there. But we treat the SDR role as the trash can of sales. We get people to come in and, when they're very, very young, and we go make phone calls, to people who you don't know, who aren't expecting it and who haven't been tested. Every day you need to make 80 phone calls, in some cases 120 phone calls a day. And if you're still with us in 12 months, we'll think about promoting you to AE. This is not how you build professionalism in your sales function. This is how you burn kids out. This is how you ruin the sales and marketing function. If you treat them with respect and with the respect that they deserve, and give them a little bit of prestige inside the organisation, people are going to stay. There's professional appointment setters that are really proud of what it is that they do, but there's no place for them in the current sales. Where are they making $200,000 a year? Where are they being put on the pedestal? And I think that's why the SD function is so ruined right now.
That's such an interesting way of looking at it, because you're right. SD function is looked at as a junior thing. You're a junior person in the company, and it's really that stepping stone into becoming an AE. And you're saying that stop looking at it that way. Start compensating properly, and you would have really your next move is to become a senior SDR who targets enterprise. That becomes a career path on its own, rather than thinking about your next role as an AE who's responsible for managing clients. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, why can't we? So the world of work has changed a lot, right? But why can't we have SDRs that are making terrific money, and are treated with prestige? So there's a difference between those two. Just because you're paid well doesn't mean that you're treated well. If you look at any of the surveys that are available on places like LinkedIn, those polls, you see them all the time. What's the hardest part of your sales role? And everyone says, finding new meetings. Like every business says that getting, breaking ground is the hardest thing. So why is the first thing that we do when someone's good at that role, do we promote them out of it? It just doesn't make sense. So why can't we have SDRs that live in Noosa or, down on the surf coast in Victoria that make great money, and let's say they've got a, target of 35 meetings a month, and, they can set them in 4 hours a day and go surfing, and make, I don't know, 150, 220 grand a year. Why can't they do that? We'd have really good people wanting to do that then.
I love that. Yeah, that sounds great. I would sign up for that job. You got any openings, Mark? Because
yeah, sure. So average age of our SDR is probably 40.
No way! Wow.
Yep.
Compared to 25 in most organizations.
Yep. Because we treat them with respect, we pay them with great money. They're based all over Australia, and there's senior people that can hold a conversation. They book their meetings, they get paid their meeting bonus, and then they disappear because they've made their money, done what they needed to.
I love that. Okay.
So they're not being rewarded or measured on quantity. They're being rewarded and measured on the quality and the actual outcomes. So it's in their benefit to make 27 calls, have 6 phone calls, and book 1 or 2 meetings. Right? It's not in their benefit to make. And
is there a function that does the checking beforehand? So you know how you were talking about like cleaning the list, calling people, see who answers. So do you have a junior role that kind of does that work?
So Kevin, my COO, so he looks after all the data. So that's his most important job. Manage the data, get the data right before you feed it to our people. But yes, but we have sales ops teams that do that data processing, so making the phone calls. So Kevin does that in the first instance to test the data. He's in charge of dividing the data into small ICPs, and then I'm responsible for writing the outreach for each one of those ICPs. So if we took that outreach cadence that we spoke about before, as the lead capture tool, we then divide that into ICPs, and then I'll write the outreach across what sort of channels and what that outreach looks like. So how many times across what time frame, depending on what I think each ICP is going to need. And I know we started at this saying we were going to share some cadence, so let me just give you an example of what works.
Let's do it. I want to hear it.
So if you're going to, it's ICP dependent, right? So don't plug and play this and think this is going to work for everybody. But in the smaller businesses, businesses turning over less than 50 mil Australian, you might, if they're on LinkedIn, you might want to go and have some sort of LinkedIn interaction with them 3 days before you start your cadence, because the average connection acceptance is 3.5 days. So doing LinkedIn interactions and then trying to start a cadence straight away is fundamentally flawed, unless you're dealing with people who are on LinkedIn a lot, which is like sales leaders and recruiters. So you need to give yourself a little bit of a lead time straight away. So if they're not in that ICP, go and do a bit of LinkedIn interaction 3 days before you start your cadence, and then you might want to do something like a phone call, leave a voicemail or send a text message, and we send a text message if it is an automated voicemail. But if I can hear that it's your voice, I'll leave you a voice message, and I'll point towards an email. So instead of asking for a call back on that voicemail, we just say something like, "Hey Mark, looks like I've caught you and haven't caught you, and it looks like understand you wouldn't pick up from a number that you don't know. What I'm going to do is send you an email now. That subject line might be big chickens." And then
I send your phone.
Yeah, and then the first line that I put in the email is "as per my voicemail" or "as per my text message." So when that hits people's phone, the preview text reinforces the double reach out.
Love it.
Right. And then, we might make a phone call on the second or third day, reply to that email. If they are on LinkedIn, we'll go back to that platform. We send them another email 2 days after that. So typically our cadences only go for 7 to 9 days. Each touch will have 2 or 3 different channels. So, phone call, text message, and an email, or maybe phone call, text message, and a reply email, or something like that. So we try and make sure there's at least 2 or 3 across each channel. And it would only go for 9 days and might have 5 touches. And we find that we get answers on touch 3, 4, maybe 5. So you just don't need to go any further than that. And this is against what the outreach, those engagement platforms promote, because they want a long, complicated, drawn-out cadence so that it seems too difficult for you to manage manually, and therefore you'd need to buy their stuff. But I'm telling you, if you go beyond 3 pieces of outreach, like 3 phone calls, and multiple touch, our response rates go down. So why would you want to do 17? How many people are responding on touch 17?
Yeah.
I've got less than 10% response rate on touch 6. So why would I continue when the value, I can just put new leads in and get a 30% response rate? Like this, you're burning through your SDRs by asking them to do 17 touches, with a response rate of less than 5% at that point.
Mark, what about other channels? Do you like leverage direct mail? Do you leverage any of that stuff?
We do. So not to the extent that you guys do. You guys are the absolute gurus when it comes to that stuff. But we send, things like Tim Tams, in a coffee cup. That works really well. And I love doing customized cartoons. So I go and get somebody to create a cartoon, so an original cartoon, and I'll think about what the challenges are for that individual ICP. And then we create cartoons, and the reason why I like these is because we can create them digitally and we can send them across multiple platforms such as email. You can text message them to somebody. You can connect with somebody on LinkedIn and send them the picture there, and you can also print it out, put it on a little bit of card, and send it in the mail. So it's consistent across multiple channels. And so at the moment we're talking about businesses that have been small business owners who have been in business for more than 12 years. And the cartoon says most business owners are now at a fork in the road, growth or exit. Right? So, and we've got a little cartoon of a man at a fork in the road with a mountain and a finish line. You can picture it, right? It's really easy. And then we have a blank space, and my team go into slides and they just customize the cartoon through name and company. So when that lands, most people go, oh, that's cool. We've got a little customized cartoon of me being in fork in the road. And then you can use fork in the road in your email headlines, your narrative on the phone, your voicemail, and people go, oh yeah, I saw that. Right, and you might pay $150, $200 to a freelance guy to draw up a little single line cartoon, and then you can use it across campaign. So we do use direct mail, but in that format.
Love it. It's like it's low cost but very effective and very personalized. I love that.
Yeah. So they're the sorts of things that we do that they require a little bit more work, but it lifts those response rates to such a high level that it makes it silly not to do it.
Yeah, it makes sense. That was, by the way, that was an amazing piece of advice and takeaway. Before we talk about rapid fire questions, is there anything else that you reckon we didn't touch on when it comes to building sequences, things to keep in mind from marketing perspective, from the SDR perspective, from sales perspective? Anything that you think we should touch on before we jump into rapid fire stuff?
Okay, so the two things really are, well, there's three: quality over quantity. Okay, the ICP divide it super narrow. Right. And most people think, a list of 150 people is not enough. And that's because they're doing too much outreach at once. 150 people is a week's worth of work if you're giving people 20 leads at a time, because they're going to be really deliberate about their outreach. Right. So divide your ICPs, get your lists and cut them right down, and then build individual outreach for each one of those. And the piece that goes over the top of that is, then the database management. Check the contact data several times, test it, validate all the emails, validate all the phone numbers before you even give that to the SDRs. And then that way you don't have to manage on quantity. You can manage on quality. What's the quality of the conversation? How long did you stay on the phone call for? What did you reply to on the email? How did you interact with them on LinkedIn? So you can have those types of conversations when you're not managing such large numbers.
Love it. I love it. Thanks for that. And that was a great summary.
Have you read the State of ABM and APAC report yet? If you have, you'll know that 59% of marketing leaders are intending to increase their ABM investment in the coming year. Even bigger news is 0% of survey respondents are going to decrease their investment. It's an exciting time for ABM in the region. Discover the state of account-based marketing in APAC today. Download the full report at abm.xgrowth.com.au/report. That's abm.xgrowth.com.au/report.
Okay, I've asked this before, but I'm going to go back to these rapid fire questions, and I want to see if things have changed.
All right.
So the first question I want to ask is, and you've already dropped some insights on this already, but what is one resource? Could be a book, a podcast, a blog, whatever it is, that has had a profound impact on the way you work or live. I'm going to add a caveat there, in the last 12 months.
So we
could double it to 24 months if that makes it easier. I ask this because I know we've gone through some of these questions before.
Yeah. Okay. So I think probably the 30 Minutes to President's Club podcast is probably the biggest piece of content that I've enjoyed in the last 12 months. 30 Minutes to President's Club. It's Nick Selesky. No, I've said that wrong. And Aman Farokh They're the two podcast hosts. They're young guns, and they get a lot of really good talent on there to talk about how they do their outreach. So I think that's probably the most valuable piece of resource of the last 12 months.
I'm going to check that out for sure. I'm going to check that out. Okay. If you could give one advice to B2B SDRs, what would it be?
Slow down to speed up. Slow down your outreach. Slow down the process to speed up the results. Stop trying to get quickly to the end result of a meeting. Instead, go through the process deliberately. Give people the opportunity to look at what it is that you're offering before you try and book the meeting, and you'll actually get faster meetings.
Love it. Who are some of the new influencers that are on your radar, and you're looking at what they're doing?
Yeah, well, I think this is really important in the sales development space, right? So, sales has a propensity to go and look for the old guys, right? Guys like me or even older that have been in sales all their life and come with the strategy and, authors. Sales development, it's not about how long you've been able to do it. It's like what's working now. So it's very much about recency rather than experience. So as a result, the young guns that you should follow really have got a lot of the answers. So of course there's Amanda Nick that I spoke about already. Morgan J. Ingram has been around for a little while. He's a good guy. Jed Mahl is another. So that's Marhle, I think, Jed Mahl. So these are young guys that are running, sales development teams in SaaS businesses, and they're, trying things and breaking them.
I love it. That's great stuff. Okay, last question. Mm-hmm. What's something that excites you about B2B today?
The fact that we're moving away from quantity and into quality, and that means that we've got to be much more creative, which I think, makes sales fun, right? So, it's actually fun to try and come up with some cool outreach ideas, and get people on the phone and see if it sticks. And I think that's what's missing. We've become a little bit robotic, but I'm really excited about the level of creativity that we're going to need to put in to get results.
I hear you. And you're right. It does make it a lot more fun versus, oh shit, I got to go through, 500 contacts right now. And I'm just this machine that just smile and dial, baby. Just smile and dial. Just keep going through the motions versus, hey, I'm going to customize this and I'm going to do, yeah, you're completely right. It makes it a lot more pleasurable. And that's such a good point that you bring up.
Yeah. So and as crazy as this will sound, that even goes to your cold calls, right? So if you're making cold calls with a genuine sense of curiosity about what's going to resonate and what's not, then you stop trying to book the meeting and you start saying, hey, Mark, is this of any interest to you just out of the or am I way off? Because I'm trying to figure this out. And guess what? That changes the conversation 100%. So people start saying, oh, you're close. Why are you ringing me up anyway? And then you're in the conversation.
I love it. Mark, this has been, as always, an awesome conversation. Just want to say thank you for coming on the podcast again. And I always learn tons when we have a chat. So thank you so much for your time. And thanks again for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on, Shaheen.
Today's episode of Growth Colony was produced by Alexander Hipwell and Liza Maywald. It was edited by Dave Samito with additional editing by Liza Maywald and music arrangement by Alexander and Liza. Special thanks to Tina Wabe. We couldn't make the show without you. Growth Colony is hosted by Shaheen Hoda, Director of Growth at Xgrowth. If you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe and give us a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Do you think you'd be a great guest or just keen for a chat? Send through an email at podcast@xgrowth.com.au. That's podcast@xgrowth.com.au. That's all for now. We'll catch you next week, right here on Growth Colony.